But if you look at the founders of the companies, and you compare them to another great ad campaign, I'm a PC, I'm a Mac, just look at Mr. Gates on the right there, and look at Mr. Jobs on the left. You can see that the personality of the companies, the respective companies, very much embedded by the leaders of those companies. And brand personality is the thing that drives the emotion that nobody seems to understand, really drives that emotional attachment that people have for Apple. So you get, after Jobs' untimely death, you have guys like major news commentators on CNN, and won't mention any names, almost breaking out in tears. You got people putting flowers in front of Apple stores. It's pretty amazing. That kind of attachment, that kind of brand loyalty is only driven by a personality or a company that really has connected with people on a human level. And I'm going to take here the iPhone as a great example of integrated marketing communications. It starts out always the same. Steve would go, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Steve because Steve's now gone. It could be any guy that has, well, it could be any guy. Nobody will ever replace Steve, but it'll be a guy there presenting at Moscone and walking through the new product, whether it be a new Apple TV or a new Apple airplane, whatever they decide to make. And they'll be walking them through, and the next thing you're going to be doing is driving people to a guided tour. Apple uses their website better than any other company I've ever seen because the nature of their products allow them to do this. So you can actually go and take a guided tour of an iPhone from day one. Before I even saw the iPhone, I took 2 or 3 guided tours. How many have iPhones, by the way? And well, that's pretty high percentage. How many of you guys are from the West Coast? When I do this survey, it's very different. When we were back in Philadelphia, Tony said to me, well, what's the difference between people on the East Coast and people on the West Coast? And I said, people on the East Coast, they like to fantasize about living in the 19th century and dressing up like Civil War reenactors. People on the West Coast like to dress up like Star Trek people in the 23rd century. And that's the difference. There's a big cultural difference between East and West. And I know because I grew up on the East Coast and I used to be a Civil War reenactor. And I've given that up. I look like Commander Kirk every Halloween. Okay, so you got an iPhone guided tour. So you go through, you can press the buttons, you can empathize with the product, you can establish an emotional connection with the product, and you haven't even bought the damn thing yet. What does this really do? This compresses the sales cycle. At CKS, we used to do this with the Ford Motor Company, we used to do it with Mitsubishi. We used to create these demos, and people don't do this stuff anymore. I don't get it. They don't understand marketing. Conceptually, people get marketing. But we would do this stuff for major automotive companies, and you would experience what it was like to drive the car. You could open the GM product, you could turn the radio on, you could play some music. You can almost experience what it would be like to buy that car. So you wouldn't have this image of a GM car as something that an old lady in Minneapolis drives. It's something hip, it's something cool. We did this for Mazda, we did it for lots of companies. We actually did all the advertising marketing for Audi. We launched their A6. We did all kinds of stuff like this, and this is what really makes a difference. The experience and get conceptual trial and get the consumer connected to the product. And the other thing that Apple does better than any other company in the world is they make things cool. You've seen this because I have guys coming up to me and saying, I don't get it. I can buy a Droid for this. I pay all this goddamn money for an iPhone. Why would I do that? But I find myself doing it. Why? What is it about Apple? And I say, it's a cool thing, man. You don't want to be left out in there. You don't want to, look at Barack Obama. He's using a Mac now. First time a president actually used an Apple product. You have people that are considered really hip. And this is not by accident. Apple, in the early days, was a formidable force in product placement. They were constantly getting products inside the films before the film companies actually understood, like MGM began to understand, hey, we can actually charge these guys for this stuff. We used to just dim product and then put it in a Star Trek movie or something. And this went on and on and on, but also celebrities. I have a good friend, you know Alfred Mandel, Tony, right? He used to walk around Apple and find really cool people to give Macintoshes to. Does anybody know Alfred Mandel? He gave one to Michael Jackson. He'd literally go and drive to the guy's house and give him a Macintosh. Guys like Robin, that's how he got his first Mac. And then, of course, the big breakthrough marketing-wise for Apple was the Apple Store. Probably something that no other company in the world, in technology, could replicate. And I know that Microsoft is attempting to do this now, but I would never. I was at my Mac store which is located in Los Gatos, and there was a line when that new phone came out that must have gone on for a mile. And then, you know who's in the front of the line? Steve Wozniak. The Woz was #1 on the line. You knew that? Always #1 on the line. Sitting, that's right, sitting in a beach chair. And I said, Woz, you could drive down to Cupertino, they'd give you 20 goddamn phones. What are you doing?
He don't jump the line.
He doesn't care. He goes, I want to be online. I want to experience what the customer experiences. And it's just amazing to have a founder like that still doing that kind of stuff. And he's also a pretty good dancer, so he tells me. Now, Apple, you saw him on Dancing with the Stars, he had all the nerds voting for him. The guy can't dance a bit. Hey, so this is the store in New York City. And all of a sudden, the entire store becomes point of sale. It becomes a merchandising experience. You walk in there, it's incredibly clever. There's a new Apple store now. They're projecting sales in New York. One market, projections are up to $1 billion a year in just the New York City ADI market. That's not including Nassau County and Suffolk and Long Island. That's just New York City. In fact, Apple has done such a good job at retail that we have now the Chinese clone. They have the Genius Bar, they have fake products. Everything about this store is fake. But that's also incredible. I mean, that puts Apple up there with Gucci. It puts them at the top. People, if you're going to copy somebody and you can rip them off, it's Apple. Keep it simple, make it go international. If you look at, how many remember the first iPod advertising? It was very colorful, and guy bouncing up and down, woman bouncing up and down. Bono was the guy that was actually the key guy, the key musician that was right out there leading the charge. And you remember the one distinctive thing. Do you remember the one distinctive thing about the early iPod ads? The white, right? Remember the white and the earplugs and whatnot? Everything was white. And everything was either solid red, and then there's this sort of white coming down. And that was done intentionally to differentiate Apple from every other company. And very simple, because you could take that same basic visual imagery and port it anywhere in the world, and people would automatically get what you're trying to communicate, and with the same passion and emotion. Of course, nobody does better outdoor than Apple. Nobody. So you could basically be walking down by an airport after you see 2 or 3 billboards, and all of a sudden you're getting hit again with more impressions. You want to get to your computer so you can go to their site and find out what's going on. And it ports to any language, although it gets a little bit cluttered when you take it to some countries. Okay, so if we look at the Apple iPhone, successful launch effort, great word of mouth, which is also driven by the fact that it's one of the greatest products on the planet, so to speak. Highly differentiated product versus smartphones, just the whole interface, the whole user experience. Well-aligned marketing program that included every aspect of the marketing mix, from merchandising in store, to advertising, to broadcast advertising, and print advertising. Every aspect of the Marcom mix was basically fully integrated. And you can leverage the brand to extend it into things like the iPad. How am I doing on time? Or you can bring it to the people. So, in fact, I was really amazed. I think it was Wolf Blitzer was covering the Wall Street demonstrations, and Tony and I witnessed this stuff in Philadelphia. They woke us up at 4 in the morning. And you just look out there and you see all the iPads and the iPhones. It's amazing how this technology has helped prevent some of the most useless revolutions in the history of America. Because then you get in and you start talking to the people in the revolution, and they tell you things like, there's a whole list of rules now, and I was going through this in Philadelphia. There's a list of rules for everything you have to do. And it says, never address someone by he or she until they clarify their gender. Right? And I can just imagine the Bolsheviks and the Russians, raging through Moscow, amazing revolution, or the Red Guard under Mao Zedong. I just can't imagine them going around trying to clarify gender. So I said, hey, this revolution's in slow-mo. Nothing to worry about here, because they're all stoned. It really doesn't matter. But they're having a good time out there. Okay, so if you look, we just do a recap of the ads. Everything started with Steve and a major launch, and then you go over there and you can see the difference between the PC kind of guy who's incurably unhip, not a very interesting or compelling guy. There's no emotional attachment to him, none whatsoever. He's like in his mid to late 30s. He's just, the guy's from Armonk. He's just goofy. And then you look at all the dead people that love Apple products, the most creative, the hippest, smartest people on the planet. If they were alive today, they'd definitely be using iPhones, iPads, and Macs. And the first major breakthrough when Steve came back, the iPod, and then the retail store. You can see the whole mix of elements coming together.